They took Shirley around the whole countryside, everywhere. As I mentioned, they bought a translator, and she was she saw quite a bit of Japan, and during the days when I had to work there. We took the bullet train from Tokyo to Osaka, and these trains traveled at about 150 miles an hour. And when northbound and southbound passed each other, they're only 3 or 4 feet apart. The passing speed was 300 miles an hour, so that's very little time when they were actually side by side. The passing trains compressed the air between them, and it made a terrible noise. I was in Yokohama, and in my hotel, this Japanese couple were preparing to get married. And I came down the stairs just as the bride and groom were coming into the lobby, going toward a room where they were going to have the ceremony. Oh, a large crowd there, and I was able to see the bride within just a few feet. She had an outfit on that I heard cost several thousands of dollars to make, and I believe every word of it. The embroidery and the beautiful hand work, and it was obviously handmade, and the material, beautiful brocade. It's really impossible to describe it, the beauty of it. Shirley and I went to Japan, to Tokyo, and well, it was her first trip, and the downtown stores, or department stores, they're incredible. They beat Hollywood, Los Angeles stores by a mile, and Los Angeles and Hollywood, and that district there had some pretty beautiful stuff. But these department stores downtown were really something to see. They were amazing. And anyway, I had seen them in some of my earlier trips, and I knew Shirley would like that. So as soon as we had a minute, I took her down. It wasn't far from our hotel. We stayed at the Imperial Hotel the first time we were over there. I don't know why we didn't stay at the New Otani, but anyway, we walked over to these stores, and Shirley really enjoyed that. In the morning, we started out early, and I went with her the first day there. And, the stores were not open till 9, I guess. So we were there 10 minutes earlier or so. And lining up inside these big plate glass doors were all the clerks and the managers. And the clerks all had little hats and all dressed alike, all uniformed, and really well done stuff. And the managers had morning coats on with a bow tie and a real stiff white front. I don't know what you call it, but where it goes under the coat and it's stiff. And so at precisely 9 o'clock, a little ding, 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 ding went off, just very, very muted. And the two managers each got a hold of the glass door, and they each swung it in. And all the clerks, and there were a lot of them, maybe 20 or 30, lined up in 2 rows. And there were customers waiting to come in besides us. And they all bowed very in unison, It was a little ceremony, and they showed their appreciation to their customers that way. But that's part of the Japanese culture. On one of the trips to Japan, when I took Shirley with me, I had to go to Hong Kong, and I assumed that Shirley would go with me, but I wasn't really keen on her going because I knew it was going to be pretty hectic in Hong Kong, and but anyway, that I had planned to take her. So a few days before I left, we talked about it, and I made arrangements, and I asked her about what she thought about it and whether she was anxious to go or whatever, in a casual conversation. And she said, well, she'd rather stay in Tokyo. And I asked her why, and she said, well, the stores here are so beautiful and so interesting that I'd prefer to stay here, and you can go on ahead, and I'll be all right. So it suited me fine, but I didn't tell her that. I made a full protestation, but I gave in easily. And so I had planned to be gone about 3 days is all. So I went to Hong Kong, and I wasn't able to do anything, and it was really a blessing that she hadn't gone there because of the horrible crowding of people in the little tiny room that I had. I was not able to get a large enough room for both of us, and of course I was busy going from one spot to another where I was trying to do some business. And so when I came back, I went back to the hotel there in Tokyo and reunited with Shirley. And in the meantime, while I was gone, she had gone downtown to the Ginza area and really enjoyed the sights there and the stores. And while she was in one of the stores, she told me that this Japanese lady came up to her all dressed in a traditional Japanese outfit or costume that the older ladies wore many times just during the day. And this woman asked her, or said to her, "You speak English?" And of course, Shirley responded immediately. And it turns out that this woman and her husband had 2 sons going to college in Washington State, and she was anxious to improve on her English. So you had to know Shirley to see how easily this worked. But anyway, they became big buds, and for the next 3 days, I think they turned over every article of merchandise in the stores of Tokyo. But they became great friends, and Shirley said that this woman's name was Toshi, and Shirley told me that Toshi wanted us to go out to her house that evening that I returned from Hong Kong. So I agreed. I didn't have any realization how far it was, but it was an hour and a half on a train, and I don't know how we found it, but nevertheless we arrived at the station, and they met us there and took us over to their house, and she had a nice supper prepared. But the one memorable thing that I recall from that supper was this large aluminum, probably 10-quart or so, kettle that she brought over and sat on the table. And it was a watery soup with balls of dough floating in it. She spooned out a soup bowl full. Alongside my plate was a dish of what's a green radish? Oh shoot, I can't remember the name. I'll go on and I'll come back and insert the name here when I remember it. Wasabi. Anyway, it's an extremely hot, bright green, and so I had had a little bit before with the sushi, but I didn't really appreciate the potency. So I took a spoonful of it and I put it in the bowl, and her husband was there, of course, and Shirley, and but Toshi and her husband looked at me with their kind of eyes rounded and ooh, and I said, "Oh, no problem. I like." But when I took a bite of it, a bite of the soup, oh my gosh, everything from my collar up just went into blazing heat and agony. my eyes started to water, and oh boy, I was in misery there for a few minutes until the flames went out. But they got kind of a chuckle out of it. But anyway, these pictures show Shirley and Toshi posing. Toshi had a Japanese outfit that Shirley put on, and they really had a good time. So we left there and rode the hour and a half back to our hotel. And so Shirley and Toshi then communicated by letter a number of times in the following few years, but they finally lost touch. A year or two later, perhaps, I was over there, and I'd finished my business, and I was going to leave the next day. So I was at Tokyo waiting for the next day's flight. and I decided to walk up to the Ginza to the Big Mac store and have a big old U.S. type meal. So I was standing on the street there eating it. This Big Mac doesn't have a place to sit down. It's a narrow bar along the street there in the heart of the Ginza area, and there are probably 5 or 10 waitresses or people behind the bar with cash registers taking orders, and the cooks are immediately behind them. So you order, then you just back away from the bar, which is the next step. Then, of course, is back on the sidewalk, and so you wait there until your hamburger is ready, which didn't take long. And then you stand on this wide sidewalk, probably 20, 30 feet wide, where the customers congregate while they're consuming their food. So I'm standing there and just watching the people watching, basically, and I hear, "Mr. Uji, Mr. Uji," and I look around, and there's this Toshi coming up the sidewalk, full gait, in her Japanese kimono, or no, whatever. Kimono is not the right word, but Japanese costume. And she's all smiles, and I couldn't believe it. Tokyo and its surroundings, including Yokohama, have multiple millions of people. And on our ride out to Toshi's house, we never left populated and city-type suburbs. But anyway, she was insistent that I go back out to her house and have supper, but I didn't. I wasn't in the mood for any more traveling and Japanese food. After a couple of weeks, it loses its novelty. But I refused. But I invited her out to the New Otani to see the bonsai, and when I mentioned that I was staying at the New Otani, I saw her face light up. So we got on the train and went out there, and I showed her around the bonsai. Of course, she was really appreciative of the tour. This garden and forest around the New Otani is notoriously well known around the Tokyo area. So it was a treat for her to be able to see the plantings, the enormous investment in beauty that was provided there at that hotel. And of course, the hotel lobby is commensurate with the exterior. It's just incredibly well done and just a beautiful place. So I invited her to go into the lobby and tour, but she wouldn't do it. She wouldn't go into the hotel with me. I guess she was afraid that somebody might see her going into the front door of the hotel and draw the wrong conclusions. But in any case, I never saw her again. I decided to go to Manila, Seoul, Korea, and Taiwan to check it out and take a look to see what capacities they had. I knew they could build small molds, but the size of mine was a determinant for placing a mold. So I flew to Honolulu first, and then I caught a Philippines Airlines 747 at Honolulu and flew to Manila. That's about an 8-hour flight across there, and that's not unusual, but the unique part about that section of my trip was that the Philippine Airlines had on the second deck of the 747 bunks set up so that for $75 you could sleep on the way across the ocean. And so that's what I did. We left Honolulu about 10 o'clock in the evening, and I spent the $75. I climbed up to the ladder, and the stewardess made the bed for me, and when I woke up, the sun was shining, and we were just coming in for landing at Manila. And it was pretty hot, but the third world country atmosphere immediately became apparent. I did what I came there to do. I left the next day, so I had some time, and I went downtown Manila or to the streets, and one of the things that impressed me were the jitneys. They were Jeep-like vehicles. I think they were made probably in China,
and they had a canopy over the back. It was like a Jeep pickup, basically, if you can envision it. A little bit longer, I think. And on in the bed of the truck, for example, on each side they had a bench, and then they had a canopy over the whole thing. So as a passenger, you climbed up some steps at the tailgate and sat down. And some passengers got in the front seat, and I remember there were four people on that front seat. The two passengers on the right, the driver, and one sitting on his left, just barely hanging on the outside. There wasn't any front door or any doors on the truck, so there wasn't any impediment with the door being open while he was driving. But in the back, it was crowded, and you could get on and off at any time, and I think it cost a dime to just ride wherever you wanted to go. The driver just kept driving around. He probably had a route, but I'm not sure of that. In any case, I remember I was sitting on the end of the bench in the back, and this guy jumped up on the first step. It was kind of a landing, and as the Jeep moved along, and he was selling cigarettes one at a time. And several passengers bought a cigarette. I don't know what they paid for it, but it was kind of hard way to make a living. One of the sad things I saw though were piles of garbage on the street. I mean, large piles, and people, kids more than adults even, swarming over the pile looking for something to eat. And the number of flies on that pile were many. But anyway, I didn't find any. So I didn't see any shops that could do my work, and I probably would have trusted them anyway. And I went to Seoul, Korea, and I stayed there a day. And again, I didn't find any shops with equipment large enough to machine the large blocks of steel that were involved in my molds. So I went on up to Taiwan, but a lot of molds were made in Taiwan, but again, they were small ones, and I didn't see anything there either. So I went on to Japan and finished my business on that trip. But it was kind of an interesting thing to compare, those countries to Japan. I remember, I can't remember the city in Taiwan, but I remember that it was really crowded and a lot of people in the streets. The traffic was weaving through all the people, and it wasn't clean like Japan either.
One of my trips to Japan really involved a long way to get there. I had molds in Italy that I wanted to look at Ancona on the Adriatic Sea, and I had some in Japan that were finished too at the same time. So I flew to Rome, and then I rode to Ancona in the car, and then from Rome I flew to Tokyo. And on the way to Tokyo, we stopped at Saudi Arabia, in the name of the airport. But anyway, stopped there a short time. I had a layover in Singapore for, I don't know, 30, 40 hours. I don't remember now, but I know that when I got up I got a hotel room, and the next morning I got up and I was walking down through the streets of Singapore, and I was going down this side street more or less, and looking into the stores, the small stores along the streets there. And I noticed one where they were cooking ducks, and the front of the store was open to the sidewalk. There weren't any doors, so it was just like an open stall, like about 30 feet deep or so. So right along the edge of the sidewalk inside the store there was a large galvanized tub with maybe 20 or 30 ducks that had been defeathered. And I noticed that there were two men working in there that I could see. And the first one would take a duck out of the tub and run a wire hook through its two legs and hang it upside down. And he'd dip it down into a large container with kind of an orange, thick, syrupy sauce, and submerge it in that, and then he'd raise it up and hang it on a wire and give it a push, and the wire was sloped, and the duck would slide down to the next operator, where he was at a stove there with a great big kettle, and he was cooking the ducks there. And when he got another duck, he'd drop it into the boiling water, I presume, and cook it. So I watched there a few minutes, and just to watch the operation. And I kind of then began to realize that the ducks were really plumpy, and began to examine them a little closer as he was handling them, and I noticed that the only thing that had been done was to, first cut their necks and then kill them, although the heads were still on. But that was about it, and remove the feathers, of course. But the rest of the duck it was entire, and he was cooking those ducks, guts and all, feet, the whole thing. I decided that I wasn't going to have any of the popular orange duck that I saw advertised in restaurants quite a bit as I walked around, and that cured my appetite. And then to India, and I don't remember the city we landed in India either, but it was hot there and humid. I remember when I stepped off the plane, I was wearing glasses at the time, and those glasses just fogged up completely the instant I stepped out of the atmospheric controlled interior of that plane into that unbelievable humidity and heat there. I just don't remember the name of the city there in India, but then nevertheless I flew then from there to Tokyo, and then of course back to home. So I traveled that circumnavigation in a 747 first class. I had a long ride on that 2 or 3 week trip, but at least I can say that I have been around the world. First class seat in a 747, and I was treated like a prince of Arabia in that whole time. Anyway, it was an experience that I never expected to have, and I don't think many people have had it either. But the Lord kept blessing me, and I just went along for the ride. Well, that's the last of my Oriental travels. So we'll go to the next one now.